Then in 1965, they opened up this community, which is called Hiram Clarke. But when they opened up this community, the man who was responsible for bringing electricity out here in this brand new subdivision was Mr. Hiram Clarke. And Mr. Hiram Clarke was the vice president of Houston Light and Power Company that we know as of today as CenterPoint. See, as you can see, these are little roads that Mr. Hiram Clarke had to use to make sure that these towers would make sure that electricity would be okay to come through this neighborhood and provide for the community here in Hiram Clarke. As you can see how this little trail would go? Well, Mr. Hiram Clarke would come out here to make sure that all of this thing would have electricity on this area to provide for the community out here in Hiram Clarke. And Mr. Hiram Clarke was the vice president of Houston Light and Power Company, and they gave him this project to make sure that all this community would have enough electricity to provide for their residents here. And this was a trail. As I ride down here, this was a trail that Mr. Hiram Clarke used when he was helping and designing to put these electrical poles out here for the transport electricity out here in this new subdivision, which was called Hiram Clarke. They named the subdivision after him because he was the one that helped design electricity for these people out here. When Houston annexed this in 1960, they didn't know what they were going to do with this land. And then when the medical center came out here and asked them to build this land up and develop this land, then they had to worry about bringing electricity out here. And that's when Mr. Hiram Clarke got the responsibility to come out here and design these light posts and transformers to be able to transport electricity out here in the residence. And as you can see, the reason why we did post oak, because they wanted to make sure that they would border off Hiram Clarke with post oak, which is a road. And also, so with every resident, they have to have a business area. So they use Fuquay as a business area. All this over here was shopping centers. You know, when they first came out here, Wine Garden built a big shopping center out here. And all of this, that's why you see this is a commercial land all up and down Fuquay, even as we go in today in 2018. It's still a commercial land. But when they built this subdivision in 1965, they wanted Fuquay to be their shopping area. You know, the place that they can come shop and eat and buy groceries and go out and be entertained. That used to be a Kroger over there in that corner where this medical supply is. And behind me used to be a food giant. And as we go down one of the main streets down here, which was White Heathers, and you going back into community. Remember, all these homes, when they originally was built, they was owned by white people. Black people did not buy these homes brand new. If black people came out here and bought a home, it had once belonged to a white family. Now, when they opened up this high school for whites only, it was Madison High School, right here on the corner of White Heathers and Orem. And this was the high school that the white kids went to, that their parents moved out here to open up this subdivision. So the first class to graduate out of Madison was the class of 1966. The school opened up in 1965, and it was for whites only. But blacks started integrating and coming out here in the school in the early 70s and late 60s. So when they built this subdivision in 1965, they had to make sure that they have schools for their kids, which was Holly Elementary School, and Dick Darling, and Madison. Now, the other schools have been added on since. But all of this, to make sure, all of this was part of Hiram Clarke, which was originally all whites when it opened up in 1965. And when the Civil Rights Bill was passed in 1964 and 65, when it went up back, blacks could move out here, but they did not want blacks to come out here. But then in 67, 68, blacks was getting to have an opportunity to move out here because they had to make sure that they would be able to move out here with legal rights, because these white people did not want blacks to come out here. And even when they came out here in the 70s, people do not remember, but they were burning down crosses out here to keep blacks from coming out here in this community, which we know now as Hiram Clarke, which it used to be predominantly blacks, but now it's almost beginning to be predominantly Hispanics. But Hiram Clarke and Mr. Hiram Clarke and this community will live on, with or without. Somebody will always stay out here in this community. Thanks to Mr. Hiram Clarke for bringing electricity out here, because if Mr. Hiram Clarke wouldn't have brought electricity out here, this community would never been out here. And then right up here was Post Oak. And a lot of people can remember when Post Oak dead in, or Orem was dead in right here on Post Oak. All of this on the other side of Post Oak is fairly brand new. All right, when Houston annexed this in 1960, all this was nothing but farm road. It was nothing out here but empty fields. And when Mr. Hiram Clarke, who was vice president of HL&P, came out here to be able to produce some electricity out here to the resident, this is the trail. This was no street. This was a trail that Mr. Hiram Clarke used when he was building all of those, making way for all those towers and electric towers to provide electricity out here. So when they finished up this community out here, and due to the fact that this is the trail that Mr. Hiram Clarke used to use, they decided to name this street after him, Hiram Clarke Street. And then Hiram Clarke Street ran all the way down to where the towers that Mr. Hiram Clarke was working on to bring the electricity to the residents here, out here in Hiram Clarke in 1965. So they dedicated this street here in the honor of his name, Hiram Clarke. On this corner right here, on the corner of South Main and Hiram Clarke, used to be McLendon Triple Drive-In. They had 3 drive-in theaters that you can go in and watch 3 different screens right here on the corner of Hiram Clarke and South Main. Back then, it was considered as Highway 90, which it is today. Built the medical center, helped build this community out here, Hiram Clarke, for whites only, for the people who that was working in the medical center, so they would be closer to their job. And we will go and show you where, when they built the subdivision, Hiram Clarke, it was for the workers that worked out there at the medical center, so they would be closer to their job. And they built it in 1963, and they finished it in 1965, and it was for whites only. No blacks could stay out here in Hiram Clarke. All right, welcome everybody. We're right here on the corner of San Felipe and Post Oak. Right here is where the beginning of Post Oak Road, because see, all this used to be a road back in the 40s and the early 50s. And the reason why we're showing you this road, because Post Oak Road was a trail, and the trail leads from one highway to another highway. And we only had highways here in Houston in the 40s and early 50s. And right here, we at the beginning of Post Oak Trail. All you see up in here was nothing but farmland. And the people who worked this farmland was blacks. And they stayed out there in Piney Point, which is on the other side of Westheimer, what we know in Chimney Rock was considered as Piney Point. And that's where the predominantly blacks used to live at. And they the one used to work this farm out here where you see right now, that's the Galleria. And right here is Highway 1093. All right, this is Post Oak. And like I say, one thing about Post Oak, first Post Oak was a trail in the 20s and the 30s, and then later it became a road, and now it's a boulevard. Okay, the reason why we own Post Oak so much, and we're talking about Post Oak, because Post Oak was the only street, a road at that time that would lead from one highway going out of Houston to another highway that's going out of Houston. Okay, Post Oak will come and start on Highway 1093, which is West Tyler, and then it would also dead end at Highway 90, which is South Main. All right, now as we going down Post Oak, see, 610 wasn't here. It was not no 610. All of this was a Post Oak trail that led all the way from San Felipe to Highway 90, which would cross 1093 to Highway 90. All of this here was woods. And later on, the people decided to build a community over here and call it their own little city, which is Bel Air. Okay, right here on South Main and 610, this was the end of Houston city limits, right here, where we at. And right here, you can see is Highway 90. And Highway 90 is nothing but South Main, but it's Highway 90. And all of this was considered out of Houston city limits. Okay, it was nothing but farmland. It wasn't farmland, it was just open prairie, trees and woods, all up in here. And we're talking about in the early 60s, 61, 62.